Hey guys, welcome back to the Creating a Whitetail Paradise series. Today we're going to be bringing you the third installment of the series. If for some reason you missed the first two, I will link the playlist above, but let's dive into today's episode. Today we're finally going to start talking about some of the habitat improvements or habitat manipulation tactics that you can install on your property to increase your hunting success in the fall. And when we're putting in these habitat improvements, we're really just giving the deer what they want and what they need during the fall, during the hunting season. If you want deer to use your property during the hunting season, you got to give them several things: food, secure bedding locations, and the feeling of safety. Now, notice I didn't say water, because you do not necessarily need to provide them with water because they can fulfill that requirement with a lot of the vegetation that they eat, but it is still a good idea to provide them with water, and we'll kind of talk about that in a different episode. But in this episode, we're really going to be focusing on two things: accessing your property and food plots. So we're going to talk about access first, then we'll go to food plots, and we'll kind of circle back to access. So if you remember from the last episode on how we like to set up our properties, we like to make what are called inside-out properties, meaning the deer are bedding somewhere on the interior of our property and then moving towards the exterior of our property from in the afternoon, bedding to feeding movement. So inside out. And again, the reason that we're doing this is because we want to make sure that all the deer within our property borders feel as safe as possible throughout the hunting season. And that is exactly the same philosophy that goes into how we access our properties. So again, in the previous episode, we talked about how we like to hunt towards the outsides of our property, leaving the interior alone for the most part. And this includes accessing stand locations. So to make it as simple as possible, really what we do is we just walk along the edges of our property and then cut into the stands. That way we're never disturbing the inside of the property. So if we're parking towards the bottom of the property and there's a stand towards the top, I'm not walking straight down the middle to get to that stand. I'm not taking the easy way to get there. I'm going all the way around the property and then cutting in to get to that stand. And the reason for that is if I'm walking straight to my stand from where we park or from where the cabin is, even if I have an amazing scent control routine, I'm still going to be leaving some sort of a sign that I was there. And I don't want any deer on the interior of my property to see me, to smell me, to hear me, to have any idea that they're being hunted. Now, deer are wild animals, and it's going to happen where they're going to get downwind of you on the back side of your stand. That's okay, it's going to happen. There's not much you can do about that, but the reason that we're doing it the way we do is to eliminate that as much as possible. So if we're walking along the outsides and cutting in and setting up most of our improvements on the interior of our property, the chances that they're going to be walking behind us are slim. Now, it's going to happen from time to time, but the majority of the movement is going to be on the inside of the property. Now, let's take that a step further. Now, just because you're accessing along the outsides of the property does not always mean it's secure access, and your access has to be secure. So what do I mean by that? Well, if you have a food plot, let's say on one side of the property, and you're kind of just walking along the edge of it, that's going to be a problem. So in that instance, you would need to screen the area. So there's lots of different types of screens you can use depending on how fast you need it. There's annual screens, there's perennial screens, there's conifer screens, you can hinge cut screen. You have to make sure that when you're walking into your property, if there's ever an area that's wide open, and you're exposing yourself to deer movement, that you screen the area off. Now, that you don't always have to screen the area off. If you know you're walking through open hardwoods and during the middle of the day and there's a very low chance that there's going to be a deer there, you probably don't need to screen that area. But let's say you're walking 50 yards away from one of your food plots on your property and it's not screened appropriately, that's going to be a big problem. You are now educating those deer that they're being hunted, and your chance of success is going down. As the hunting pressure on your property goes up, daylight deer movement goes down. So everything that we do is to eliminate hunting pressure on our deer herd. Access is going to be a little bit different on every property, but that's the general idea behind how we access our properties. And some properties are going to have a little bit easier time than others. We have a property up north, it's on the corner of two roads. That property is a lot easier to access because we can just walk down the road and cut in. Walk down the other road, cut in. We know the farmer on the other side, we have permission, we can just walk down one of his hedgerows through his cow pasture and cut in. So that property is very easy to access. This one's a little bit more difficult. We don't really have access to come in from the neighboring properties, so we have to do everything on this property, and so we've had to do more hinge cut screening, switchgrass screening, things like that to kind of hide our movement within the property. Access is extremely important. If you're spooking deer on the way to or from your stand, your hunt's gonna be over before it even starts. Now let's transition into food plots. And I'm not really gonna tell you guys what to plant because I think you can plant a lot of different food plot varieties and find success. I'm mainly gonna talk to you about our strategy when it comes to food plot location. And that's one thing that I think is extremely important, and it kind of sets the foundation of your entire property. So the first thing that I'm doing when I'm trying to find a location for a food plot is I'm looking for the destination food source. So a lot of times these are going to be the agriculture fields near your property, whether it's alfalfa, sometimes it's cornfields, sometimes it's bean fields. If you don't really have anything around you, you could have a big stand of white oaks that the deer are going to be hanging in all night. Your destination food source is going to be a little bit different depending on your area, but that's the first thing I like to look for. Where are the deer going to be heading at night? And sometimes you can have multiple destination food sources around your property. If you got, you know, a soybean field on this side and you got an alfalfa field over here, that could be splitting the deer movement. And we'll kind of talk about that too. One thing I want you to understand is if there is a soybean field next to your property, you are not going to stop those deer from going there. If that's where they want to go for their destination food source, there is nothing that you can do to stop them from going there. What you need to do is slow them down in getting there. So what we like to do is find that destination food source, come into our property about 80 to 100 yards and make multiple small food plots. Now I would not recommend making these food plots any larger than a half acre. You can go a half acre, quarter acre, eighth of an acre. You know, these smaller food plots, or what are called staging plots, kill plots, pass-through plots. There's lots of different names for them. But essentially, these are the plots that the deer are going to filter through on the way to the destination food source. And again, you do not have to have the destination food source on your property. You want to make sure that you're putting your food sources in between the bedding area and the destination food source. You know where the destination food source is. Let's say it's over here, right? And you know your bedding area is here. Well, if you put your small micro plot on this side of the property, those deer are not going to go out of their way to hit that micro plot and then turn around and go all the way to that destination food source. That's not what they're going to do. They're going to get up out of their beds and they're going to walk straight to that destination food source because that's where they want to be. So if you already know that's where they're going, back off of that destination food source, come into your property, find a spot that you can get in and out of safely and put your food plots there. It doesn't necessarily have to be the best food plot location in terms of an open area like this or the best soil. It just needs to be in the right spot as it relates to that destination food source. Now I will say this, let's say you're the guy that has nothing but timber around him, so all you have is cover, you don't have a destination food source. Like I said in the previous episode, now your property is going to have a little bit more work than others, but you can have a huge influence on the local deer herd. You're going to have the destination food plot on your property as well as those micro plots, those staging plots, those pass-through plots. So you're going to have both on your property. If you don't have a destination food source anywhere near the area, they're just going to devour those micro plots. So you have to have some sort of a destination food source in the area. Now, scenario two, let's say you have a destination food source on this side of your property and a destination food source on this side of your property. Well, then you can kind of pick which way you want to send those deer. That's kind of what we have on this property. We've got a hay field on one side and a bean field across the road from that. And on the other side of the property, we've got soybeans. So we got two types of destination food sources where the deer like to hang out at night. Well, on the bean field side, we have serious hunting pressure. We've got people hunting the property line. We got people driving ATVs up and down the property line. So we have a huge amount of hunting pressure on that side of the property. Well, guess where we put our food plots? On the other side. We don't want to send our deer towards that side of the property. So what we did is we made several small food plots, sort of a food plot system to filter those deer out into that hayfield where we know there's very little, if any, hunting pressure. So another thing to consider when you're putting in your food plots on your property is try to put in more than one. Now you're putting them all on the same side of your property, shaded towards that destination food source, but put in more than one. And there's two reasons for this. One is probably the most important. Does are very territorial. That matriarch doe, she's going to come out to that food plot and she's not going to let any other doe family group out there until she's done. So if you have multiple small food plots in the same area, you are now allowing multiple doe family groups to come out to these food plots. And that's going to reduce the overall stress on your deer herd on your property. And lower stress levels means more deer movement, more predictable deer movement, better hunting for you. And the second thing that allows you to do is hunt the trails into the food plots with multiple wind directions. So if you have multiple food plots in close proximity, but you have stands on opposite ends of them, it just gives you a lot more opportunities for different wind directions. So it helps you as the hunter. And the last thing I'll say about food plots is just be creative with your designs. There's lots of really good concepts for food plot shapes. Like this one right here is just basically a big lane. It's 15 yards wide by about 150 yards long, and so the deer move back and forth down the food plot. You could also have some sort of an hourglass where you got, a circle on one side, it pinches down into a small area where your stand is on one side or the other, and then it opens back up into another larger section. What this does is when the deer move from one section to the other, it kind of pinches them close to your stand so you have a shot at them. So there's lots of different ways that you can kind of shape your food plots, and maybe we can talk about that in a separate video. So I said we'd circle back to access after we talked about food. And the reason was because I wanted you to kind of understand how we have the deer move through our property. So again, everything is happening on the inside of our property. And we have the deer kind of bedded on the interior on one side, and then they're moving through our property to our food plots and then filtering off into the destination food source. And so with us accessing from the outside and sitting on stands just on the inside of our property facing the interior, we can watch this deer movement without them ever knowing that we're there. If we're going right down the middle of our property where our food plots are and where our deer trails are, where our bedding areas are, we're going to be spooking off deer in every direction. So hopefully the way that we securely access our properties from the outside and cutting into our stands, along with where we're placing our food plots in relation to the destination food sources, makes sense. If for some reason it does not, or you have additional questions, please drop them in the comment section below, and I'll make sure to answer those as soon as I can. But we will see you guys in the next episode.